What's one sentence that you want to tell everyone out there if they don't listen to the whole episode? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things cEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I am your host, Callahan, and today we are going to be talking about why every EDH player could be benefited by giving cEDH a try. But first, we've got to pay the bills. Tickets for our latest Mox Masters tournament are now on sale. Compete for $2,000 in prizes and points towards our invitational coming this October. Tickets sell out for each event, so pick up yours today. Our merchandise is available on our store. We currently have dice and coins and some other stuff there, so go ahead and check it out at playingwithpowermtg.com and help support the channel. You can also support the channel on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, play days, early access to videos, names and the credits of our show, exclusive videos, the opportunity to watch our gameplay recordings live, and even the ability to be on an episode. There are tiers for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg to help support the show today. Also, if you're looking to support the podcast, reach out to Ryan's email in the podcast notes or the YouTube description.
Speaking of patrons, we also do a Patreon shout out for every single episode, and today's Patreon shout out goes to Seth McQuaid.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Seth. We appreciate you a lot. All right, so let's dive into the main topic of today. Now, this is why every casual EDH player should try cEDH. Now, before we get into the topic, I want to stress that we're not saying that every single casual EDH player should also be a cEDH player. We know that's not reasonable. We know that's not, how everyone has fun. And we're not trying to tell anyone how to have fun today. But we do feel that there's a lot of benefits, which we'll go through over this episode, which could benefit people to at least try it. And if it is something that you enjoy, maybe continue to do so. So let's go ahead and dive into the first one. So Cal, what is one of the first things that you feel is a reason why an EDH, casual EDH player, I'm going to get that messed up a lot this episode, should give cEDH a shot?
Yeah, I think the first and most obvious one is just to see if it's for you, like you said, Ryan, not every way of playing Magic the Gathering is for everyone. And a lot of people did end up in the EDH space in the first place because for one reason or another, they were kind of put off from the more traditional competitive Magic scene, whether it be the grinding lifestyle or they didn't like Standard at the time and whatever, and just dropped off the horse or whatever. So, a lot of people already know that not all types of Magic are for them, but cEDH very well could be for you. But I think a lot of people have conceptually said to themselves, "Oh, I won't like cEDH, therefore I will not give it a try," without ever having actually tried it. And then I've talked to quite a few of those people actually, and a lot of the people I know who play cEDH, including yourself, Ryan, but we'll talk about that more later, very much had an idea of what cEDH was in their head before they started, and then they didn't actually get it until they tried it. So I think that's like the main reason actually that I would say that every EDH player just sort of give cEDH a try just to see if you like it, because you could be missing out on something that you actually would really like without even knowing it, just because you didn't give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we will get into the details of it a little bit. But I think the word competitive really turns a lot of people off. And if you ever hop onto Magic Twitter and you happen to kind of fall into some of the circles of cEDH players on that Bird app, you'll notice things like tournament report and grinder this and tournament prep that and all this other stuff. And that can turn a lot of people off too. And I think it's important to note that cEDH isn't just a tournament EDH format. It is definitely just, it's just Commander played at the very highest levels possible. And there are plenty of people who play cEDH all the time who never enter a tournament, just like in the 1v1 formats. They go, they play Modern, and they love Modern to death, but they've never played in a Modern tournament. They just like to play kitchen table with their friends. All their friends have Modern decks. They like to play Janky Brews or something like that, and they have a lot of fun with it. And CDH is very similar to that. There's nothing that says that if you are a CDH player that you're automatically a grinder, or you're automatically somebody who only plays in tournaments and just all this other. It doesn't have to be about that. And there's absolutely nothing that says that if you are a CDH player that you have to do that. And it's not. It's actually could just be played at the kitchen table like Commander, just played in the most broken ways possible.
Yeah, exactly. We just CDH is EDH is a pretty common refrain that we've said on the podcast. We've had it on a shirt. It was something that we used to say a lot. Because it's true. There's a lot of things that are still present in the heart of many a CEDH player, that is present in the heart of the EDH player, which is a lot of times, there's a lot of CEDH games that are just like for fun. We're hanging out. We just so happen to have really powerful decks. We're taking things like slightly more seriously, and that we're making sure that priority works correctly and all that kind of stuff. But past that, it can often be a pretty casual experience while also remaining, competitive CDH. But that's the thing about this too. Like, we're encouraging you, if you're just an EDH player, to try CEDH to find out if it's for you. But if you play a game or two and you realize that you don't actually like playing this entire end of the format, like my friend Shivam has tried out cEDH on my recommendation, and he tried it out before he knew me as well. And if you know anything about Shivam, he's about the most casual Magic player out there. And the way he likes to engage with EDH is, he has his soldiers deck, which is basically almost like an RP soldiers deck. And if it's not conceivably a soldier or something that could be in an army, it's not in his deck. And that's just like the way that he finds enjoyment in EDH. And if you are the same, that is perfectly okay. We are not trying to tell you how you should be having fun, but definitely still think you should give it a shot, even if you think you won't like it, because you might.
Yeah, very true. All right, let's dive into the next reason. And this one is actually, it's a really alluring one. That is, there is no rule zero in cEDH. Or maybe I should say more specifically, the rule zero.
We skipped the pregame conversation, pretty much.
Yep, exactly. We don't have the pregame conversation. You will find loads of articles and videos and tweet threads and all this stuff about power level and gameplay experience and questions you should ask. I've seen people create forms to fill out that have like 12 questions on them. And I'm like, sounds exhausting. It's the best way I could put it. Like, I don't want to fill out a form before I play. Can we just play? Well, what about the gameplay experience and the shared social, this, that, and the other? That's all fine. And I play casual EDH too. I usually play it with a trusted friend group, so we all know where our power levels are at. But all that stuff around pregame conversations and stuff like that, cEDH doesn't have those. And the reason we don't have those is because it's already been kind of figured out ahead of time. The rule zero of cEDH is everybody's playing the highest power possible and everyone is trying to win. There is no talks about, well, what turn does your deck win? And that's actually a flawed question, but whatever. Like, because stacks is a thing, intentionally slowing down the game doesn't mean your deck's not powerful. And like those types of questions, those don't happen in cEDH. Rule zero for cEDH is just, let's all play to win and let's all play in the most powerful way that we can possibly imagine.
Yeah, in my opinion, that's definitely one of like the greatest strengths that cEDH has from like almost a game design perspective, I would say, is that, yeah, like it has been for a very long time one of the biggest stumbling blocks in many a casual EDH player's life is that it's tough to actually get a solid game a lot of the times, especially if you are playing in what is now referred to like as the untrusted, untrusted unknown spaces. Show up at an LGS, play with 3 people you don't know that well is a lot different than, going over to your pal's house where you guys have played against each other, every week for the last 8 months for the last, it's a bit different. And that's just tough to figure out. And like you said, people have been putting a lot of brain, but less so recently, actually, it seems. There was a real kick of it like a year ago or so, where a lot of people were all of a sudden like, all right, we're going to solve the pregame conversation once and for all. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do it. We're going to do it well and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's honestly, I've talked to people who have said it's been like refreshing to play cEDH, and the understanding is just, yeah, we're here to win. We're trying to win. Our decks are strong. We might win on turn 1. We might win on turn 12. But we're here to win. And like conceptually, everybody is on a roughly even power level. Obviously, there is a big difference in between like a mono green cEDH brew and something like Rograk Silas, which is like one of the fastest ad nauseum decks out there you could have to just like win the game on what turn 1 or 2 or what have you. There's a little bit of a difference there in theory, but on a power level. But everyone is at least saying, hey, I'm here. My power level is big. Let's win the game. And this does often lead also to like less bickering, less feels bads at the table and that kind of stuff, because it's a very common thing in an EDH game to go like, oh, well, you said that your deck didn't. Well, yeah, I lied. Sorry. It's an interaction that I've seen happen like more than once. Or, oh, I forgot that was in my deck. Or, oh, my deck never does this. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, Soul Ring into Arcane Signet into Felwar Stone, and you put them in the deck, my guy.
Well, I have a 3-card combo and no tutors. Whoops, I just happened to draw into it.
Yeah, I didn't have any tutors, but my commander draws 5 cards every turn. Oh, mamma mia. I mean, that's just not something that you really have to worry about as much in cEDH. So if that's appealing to you, there you go.
Yeah, I definitely, I advocate a lot for cEDH whenever I hear gripes online about it, this, that, and the other. Be like, hey, did you know you could skip all of that if you just tried cEDH?
Because if you just played a strong deck.
Just played a strong deck to begin with. Like, and it gets so much to the point where you almost forget about it. If you play enough cEDH, you almost kind of forget that happens at casual tables at places like conventions, or, you know, your LGS and you don't know the person or the pod. It almost kind of falls to the back of your mind because we don't ever have them. cEDH players don't have rule 0 conversations. Yep. Even if you come in with the cEDH mindset and you bring like a tier 2.5 decks, there's not tier decks, but I'm just paraphrasing here. Yep. Like you said, if you bring your mono green deck that can win very quickly, there's not even a rule 0 conversation there. It's like, yes, I'm going to try and win as fast as possible with a Zuri Renegade leader. Okay, let's do it. You know, like,
yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and exactly. and it's really cool, especially when something like the Azuri Renegade leader deck ends up stomping the table,
winning. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's totally correct, Ryan. So it's it does seem to me as if maybe EDH players have figured this out a little bit more, or maybe they just like stopped talking about it as much. I know I haven't seen it as much, but you know, at the end of the day, we're here to win, and that can, while that is not for everyone, you know, a lot of people don't actually care about winning in EDH, and that's fine. And honestly, I don't care about winning a lot of the cEDH games I play either. Like, that's my goal. But if I lose, as long as I had a fun time, it's like a good time, and I usually have a fun time, right?
Yep.
And so, you know, if this has been a little bit of a grit in your gears when it comes to the EDH space, and you're just like looking for a shared understanding that's easily accessible at the beginning of the game, cEDH can do that for you for sure.
Yep. There's an anecdotal story that I have. It's I'm really old, and I used to watch a show called Frasier. It's like 20, 30 years old. Anyway.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sure you have. But I have a feeling you probably haven't seen it. But
no, I have not seen Frasier. Okay. Is that the one about an old detective?
Oh, I'm so old. I think that's Matlock.
Yeah, it's Matlock.
Okay. Well, anyway, Frasier is about 2 sophisticated brothers, and there's an episode when they go to a wine club, and in this wine club they have rules and bylaws, and someone's trying to be like the leader of the club or whatever. And they said, okay, well, you know, this vote and 2/3 majority this, and I can override that and do all this other thing. And they were having all these arguments about the nuances and stuff like that about it. And there was this old guy who was sitting in a chair. He's like, you remember when we used to come to the wine club just to drink wine?
Yeah, just to drink wine.
And that's sometimes how I feel about it. I'm like, okay, well, you have to do this. You have to fill out this form. You have to talk about this. And everyone has to determine what a 7 actually means in their personal.
Yeah.
Like, you remember the time
Do you
when
remember when we just played Magic to play Magic?
you remember we just played Magic? Remember we just sat down and played Magic? And that's kind of what I think of a lot of times when I think about these, pregame conversations and whatnot. It's like, you remember when we just used to play Magic? And cEDH can definitely kind of give you that feeling. It's like, okay, why don't we just sit down and play instead of talk about playing?
Yeah, exactly. And in that vein, I think another great reason to try cEDH out is that even through just like one game, but especially if you play multiple games, it can very quickly gain you a deeper understanding of the game, both by like helping you improve your deck building and improving your gameplay. But in addition to all of that, there is a kind of a problem that some people do have getting into cEDH, is that it can be relatively complicated. You have to learn how the stack works pretty well. You have to understand how priority works really well. Granted, those things are not that hard to learn, which is why I think a lot of people can pick up a lot about them in just like one game of cEDH where you're doing everything by the book. But in playing cEDH, a lot of very complex situations will come up, and it's not like in a normal EDH game, it can be pretty easy to kind of just like hand wave those things away, just kind of be like, oh yeah, that's not that big of a deal. Because yeah, whatever, the results don't matter. But like when we're trying to like sit here and win, we got to figure out exactly how this works, so we know how this impacts the board. Um, you can gain a deeper understanding of the game really quickly while playing cEDH, and I think that can be a great boon, because that's, even if cEDH ends up not being for you, that's knowledge that you can take back to playing any other way of playing Magic the Gathering, just to like level yourself up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's a lot of cards that you will see in cEDH that, can be seen in casual games as well. But as you go through and play cEDH, you'll say, wow, that's a really cool interaction I never knew was something I could do. The example I always come to is Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library happens in your draw step. The first thing you do in every single phase and step is the action that describes that phase or step. Your draw step, the very first thing you do in your draw step is draw a card. And then all the triggers go on the stack for that draw step. Things like your Mana Vault trigger, things like that. Sylvan Library is one of them. So you get to draw a card, then you get to resolve your Sylvan Library. Well, that's a triggered ability that can be responded to. So let's say in your draw step, you draw a top of deck tutor like Vampiric Tutor. You can respond to your Sylvan Library by casting that Vampiric Tutor that you just drew. Well, a lot of people just kind of say, okay, I'll draw 3 cards.
Draw the 3 cards. Yep. I'm brainstorming, baby.
I'm brainstorming every one of my draw steps. Yeah. Exactly. And you really start to learn those things when you play cEDH. And I'm not to say that you can't learn that stuff in casual, but it's, by definition, what the actual casual is. You just play casually. Yeah, I'll draw 3 cards. I'll pay it life. I'll keep them. And it's just what people do. But you get a much deeper understanding of the game when you play cEDH, because those little intricacies can really matter. I'll draw for turn. My Sylvan Library triggers. Oh, hey, I got a Worldly Tutor. I'm going to cast Worldly Tutor and go get my card I need to win the game or something like that. Those types of things you really do see start to shine and start to bubble up in games of cEDH that you don't always get to see in games of casual. I'm not saying you don't see them. I'm saying you don't always get to see them. They're a little bit more rare. Where in a cEDH, you see that kind of stuff all the time. Holding priority, doing certain things like Dualcaster Twin Flame involves holding priority. Those types of things. And so
you have to cast Twin Flame targeting a creature and then hold priority so you can flash in your Dualcaster Mage while Twin Flame is still on the stack.
Yep.
Because if you don't hold priority, you'll just pass it around and your opponents are like, all right, your Twin Flame resolves.
And then you're like, okay, I'm going to cast Dualcaster Mage. Be like, targeting what?
Yeah, there's no Twin Flame on the stack for you to make a copy of anymore. So you can make infinite Dualcaster Mages. Womp, womp.
Yep. And that's, that can sometimes lead to a salty situation because you didn't have the understanding.
By the letter of the law. Yeah. Exactly.
But, obviously casual games are like, I see what you were trying to do or whatever. And then they get mad because you tried to combo. But you can absolutely have those types of understandings that you didn't get to see before. And that's one of the things I really love about cEDH. You get a much deeper understanding of the game.
Yep, exactly. And we're going to continue discussing how you can gain a deeper understanding of the game through playing cEDH. But first, we're going to take a quick break.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Card Conduit. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them to get the best value of my extra cards. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have 3 main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best buy list price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. They give you the best price for your cards. They work with competitive buy listing partners, including ones not open to the public. Users get an average of 19% more for their collection than they would have from a major retail buy list, even with Card Conduit's fees. Card Conduit also optimizes buy listing for card condition as well. Since vendors have different penalties for wear and tear, Card Conduit will find the best buy list price against the specific condition of a card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the show notes or the description, or use the promo code POWER, you'll also get 10% off their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's podcast.
And welcome back to the Playing with Power podcast. We are still discussing all of the wonderful things you can learn by playing cEDH. And we're currently still discussing how you can gain a deeper understanding of the game. But specifically, a way that this happens is that it can actually drastically improve your gameplay. Look, I know casual EDH, like Ryan just alluded to a second ago, when you're playing EDH, you're just jamming. You're playing casually. But that doesn't mean that you have to play the game poorly. I know I do, but that doesn't mean you have to. And there's a lot of ways in which cEDH can kind of help you out to this effect, because in playing cEDH games, like I said, even one cEDH game can teach you a lot about threat assessment. It can teach you a lot about resource management, using your mana most effectively, all this type of stuff. So if you're improving your gameplay is a great way, I think, to have more fun in more EDH games, because like if you're playing the game better, turns out the game will go your way a little bit more, and then you'll win, because that's what we care about in EDH, right, Ryan?
That's the only thing we care about. What are you talking about, Cal? It's not about fun. It's about winning only. No, for real though. So the thing about this, and I can hear detractors right now saying, "Oh, that sounds exhausting." Oh, you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be real. It kind of can be. Like if you're thinking there, like I played in again, a little bit of an anecdote. I did play in 2 cEDH tournaments this last weekend. We're recording on Tuesday, as we do, and this last Saturday and Sunday, I participated in a 4-round cEDH tournament and a 5-round cEDH tournament. And that's like only 9 cEDH games in 2 days, which I've done more than that in the past. But that's, especially when you're like locked into like the tournament level type of mindset for cEDH, it can be exhausting. So, maybe improving your gameplay can be a curse, but
I don't think so, but I understand what you're saying, because once again, tournament EDH is different than cEDH is different than casual EDH. I think is the key here.
Exactly.
And improving your gameplay is great, because let's see if anybody out there has had this happen to them or seen this at a table. Somebody punted the win and they got really salty.
Yep.
Well, improving your gameplay will reduce the amount of times that happens. People kicking sand and saying, "Oh, I would have won that if only I had done X, Y, and Z, and I really threw that away. I really kicking myself, and I hate this." And they get really angry, and it kind of spoils the night, or it kind of spoils the mood of that pod. And when they're just beating themselves up because they messed up, it happens to everybody. Salt is... It sees no color, sees no borders. It sees no anything. Salt is universal. And having an improvement to your gameplay And translating that over to the casual tables will, one, let you play faster, two, play with fewer mistakes and errors, and three, have a better understanding of the board state and be able to understand it at a much better glance, because casual and cEDH, they're complex, but they're just complex in different ways, and it helps you understand that stuff a little bit better.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And in that exact same vein, in addition to just like making you better at playing the game, I think it can also improve your deck building. Now, again, this is kind of a little bit of a blessing and a curse, because when you're, I think, better at deck building, your decks automatically do become more powerful, which can be problematic when you're playing EDH, because maybe you don't want that. But in the same vein, I think also becoming better at deck building also makes you much more in tune with what is powerful and what is problematic and what is not. So I think actually improving your deck building by playing cEDH or getting familiar with cEDH decks can make you a much better EDH deck builder, because you can see cards that you never would maybe think were problematic, or you can kind of like imagine the play pattern out better in your head. That'll make you say, oh, I'm aiming for such and such a, I don't want to say power level, but I want a specific experience for me or my opponents out of this EDH deck. And since I have gained knowledge in the ways of more powerful deck building, I know that I should not have this kind of effect, or I want to miss out on this many artifacts, or what have you. And what I think a really good thing that you can kind of get away from is some of the EDH deck building templates and whatnot. Like, I think if you take some time with cEDH decks, you'll notice that even though we're all kind of doing very similar things, cEDH decks are all over the place. Some have 32 lands, some have 20 lands,
22.
Some have a million counter spells. Some really turbo decks have gone away from all interaction except for like Grand Abolisher and Silence to just stop their opponents from casting spells for a turn. Depending on the plan, its needs are radically different. And I think that's something that the kind of EDH deck building template type of thing has it's kind of incidentally missed out on for EDH, is that like, depending on your plan, depending on what you actually want to do, depending on your goals that you're trying to hit, a kind of blanket, oh, this many lands, this many interactive spells, this many ramp spells, this many creatures, this many instants, this many sorceries, this many card draw effects. If you're trying to hit that for every single deck, you're going to end up with repetitive, maybe an uninspiring experience and that kind of stuff. And I think that interacting with some cEDH decks can actually really help you break out of it. Now, I don't want to say that cEDH decks are the end all be all. We are actually kind of restricted sometimes, because if you look between cEDH decks, since we are playing the most powerful cards, there might be a difference in land count or whatever. There are a lot of cEDH decks that just start with the same 35 cards. And that's a little bit more by necessity than lack of creativity, I assure you. But I know my EDH deck building has become like much more interesting and actually lower powered and more varied, all because of my extensive experience in cEDH. And I personally would think that is a bit more universal than just beyond me.
So I'm going to get on a rant now.
Oh, all right. Well,
it's rant time.
All right. I'm just going to.
Yep. So you can go ahead and zone out, Cal, and go back to work or whatever you want to do.
Because I'm going on a rant right now. No.
A lot of people that push back on cEDH say, I don't want to see the same deck over and over again. Casual EDH has become extremely homogenized over the past 5 years. If it wasn't because of so-and-so's deck building templates versions 1, 2, and 3, where it says you need to run this many mass removals and this many spot removals and this many of the flavor cards and this many of that, every single deck has become super homogenized. And then with the advent of EDH Rec, a fabulous resource, love it to death, but let's face it, there was a consequence of that site existing. This is not criticism against EDH Rec. I want to make that super clear. I love that site.
But when there's a resource for people to go, oh, I'm playing a token deck, what cards do people play in the token archetype? Yep. You end up with a lot of people with the same 20 cards in their token deck.
Yep. You come to me and you flip your commander in casual EDH. I could probably guess 90 of the 100 cards in your deck just by seeing the commander nowadays. Now, I'd say that's pretty samey. I'd say that's pretty homogenized. Oh, but I have my 10 pet cards. cEDH has that. We put pet cards in our decks all the time. We love doing that because we play EDH at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I put pet cards that
are my new pet card, Orcish Bowmasters. I think it's already pretty bad, Ryan. I know we're only a week removed from our top 5, but oh my gosh, I have not been impressed.
Pet cards trash.
Pet card, Orcish Bowmasters. Write that one down.
Hot takes. But you'll see people that'll say, I need some brewing advice in the cEDH space. And they say, oh, you should remove Dark Confidant or something like that. That card isn't good anymore. And you know what you can say to them? No. I'm going to leave it in because I really like it. Because you're allowed to do that inside of cEDH, just like EDH. Oh, I thought you weren't allowed to do that. First of all, you're allowed to do whatever you want. So you can keep it in there if you'd like. And at the end of the day, if we're talking about homogenization and you want more variety in your casual EDH games, those aren't as varied as they used to be, as much as we'd love to think otherwise. You know, if you tell me your commander and I read the commander and maybe it's an atypical one, ooh, and then you're like, oh, it's 1/1 counters. Now I can guess 90 cards in it because it's a 1/1 counters theme, or it's a tokens theme, like you said, or it's a landfall theme. I can guess 90 of the 100 cards immediately. And so that type of stuff isn't, you know, if you're saying that you don't want samey formats, casual EDH has become very samey. It has. And
there's definitely some outliers out there. Like I know some incredible deck builders who do some really cool stuff, but they're notable now because they do some incredibly non-traditional stuff.
But those aren't every other pod at your local LGS. Every other pod has the landfall deck and the tokens deck and the 1/1 counters deck.
They by making actually unique EDH decks, they have become popular because that is much less of a thing now than it used to be 5 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's no, I'm not throwing shade here. I'm not saying that if this is inferior versus superior. That's not what this conversation with this rant is about. It's about, if you're talking about variety and you're talking about variance and different things like that, I ask you to question how varied your pod is at your casual EDH tables nowadays. If you have a group, not all of them have 100 decks each. They probably all have like 3 to 5, and that's the only variety you're really getting. And you can still get that same variety in cEDH. The homogenization of the format from the lowest to the highest has really kind of spread through everything. And we're not seeing that as much as we used to. And so it could be a real breath of fresh air after you're done playing your casual game to play a cEDH game. The cEDH games in the cEDH space seem very samey, just like they do in the casual space, but they are drastically different from what you will see at the casual table itself. You will play with the most powerful cards, and it's a lot of fun to do that.
Exactly, Ryan. And speaking of, in that exact vein, actually, cEDH does give you some new experiences and things you can do, specifically with, you can kind of do things you cannot or should not do in normal EDH, but you can do those things in cEDH, and that is kind of like the taboo things. You know, you can do your all-in stacks deck. You can play monetarily expensive cards without people being like, "Oh, this deck is too powerful." You know, you can play land destruction if you really want to. It's not great, but you can. You can play A+B game-winning combos. You can play as much counter magic as you want. You know, so that is another great boon for cEDH that has brought over many an EDH player. And so if you like the sound of that, maybe give cEDH a try.
Yep. The things, this I would say is is a hard line. The actual, one of the greatest benefits of cEDH over casual, we've named a number that what you might want to give it a try with, but I would say that there's two things that I would say are the things that would say give cEDH a shot. It's the no rules, zero conversation, and nothing is off the table.
Kind of get to do whatever you want.
Nothing is off the table over here.
Exactly.
Yep. And I love that. I love the idea that you say, well, I'd really like to play a stasis deck with my Muldrotha, but my casual group doesn't like to play it. Come on over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sit down at my table.
Come on over. Sit down at my table. I would love to see your stasis lock.
Give me that puzzle to get through and try to win through. I'll take it. I love a challenge.
Yeah, we love challenges. And there's not going to be any looking down our nose. Oh, I can't believe you're playing stasis. None of that happens in cEDH. None of it does. And that is actually a hard difference between the two. Like, you are allowed to play whatever you want over here. There is no social contracts of, no one's going to be judging you. No one's going to be saying, oh, A plus B combo. That's not how I have fun. And they put their hands on their hips. And that doesn't happen over on the cEDH side. So if you had a deck over the years that you've powered up because you've just had it for 10 years, and all of a sudden your casual group kind of sneers at you a little when you use it, you can use that in cEDH and no one's going to give you those looks. And compounding on what you said, Cal, the expensive cards. 5 years ago, Gaia's Cradle didn't used to cost $1,000. And that deck, that tokens deck that you made with your $300 Gaia's Cradle that you was like, wow, it's so expensive. It's the most expensive card in my deck. Now you bring it to the table and people almost like look at you funny. They're like, oh, can't believe you're playing Gaia's Cradle. That's just too powerful. Well, of course it's powerful. It's EDH. It's supposed to be. But Gaia's Cradle didn't used to carry the stigma that it carries now. And you didn't change anything about your deck. The card just got more expensive. And that kind of stuff isn't really viewed that way over on the cEDH side. Yeah. Crop rotation gets Gaia's Cradle half the time. So, like, it's okay to play those types of things.
Mana Crypts kind of almost went through the same evolution. It used to kind of almost be like a somewhat, I don't want to say an agreed upon commander staple. Like, it was always recognized as a very strong card. But over time, as Mana Crypt went from being $20 to $40 to $100 to now, I think a non-foil cheapest will run you nearly $200.
Something like that.
It has become, oh, you play Mana Crypt, you are playing a cEDH deck. Your deck is too powerful for this table. But I don't think people's card evaluation changed. I think people's perception of the card changed because it went from being still like $40 is still expensive for a Magic the Gathering card, for people for one of 100 cards. It went from being that's a pretty, if you want to spend a pretty penny on a Magic card to give your EDH deck a good upgrade, pick up a Mana Crypt, to, oh my God, it's $200.
Mm-hmm.
That is a cEDH card. And the only thing that changed is over the last, I guess it's been like 8 years, because I guess when I was last thinking, I think Mana Crypt was probably last $40 in like 2015.
It's been a hot minute. Yeah, it's been a while.
But that's like what it used to be like in that time, kind of, which was around when I started originally getting into like cEDH. But even before then, I was into normal, much, lower power EDH, and people had Mana Crypts, but it was just kind of like, oh, that guy has a Mana Crypt. Nice. I wish I had a Mana Crypt. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had $40. Subway isn't really Subway isn't really making the Mana Crypt money, so I guess I'll have to wait to own a Mana Crypt one day. But that's the main thing that's changed, is that the price has made the perception of power, as it has gone from $20 to $40 to $200, $180, $200. And I think that's actually a very astute observation, Ryan. I wasn't really thinking about that until you mentioned Gaia's Cradle, and I was like, wait a second, Mana Crypt has done the exact same thing.
The one last one I would mention is dual lands.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
for sure.
Yeah, like, oh, hey, I'm nearly 40 years old. Dual lands didn't always cost $1,000 or whatever they cost now. I don't even know. But like, they're expensive.
Volcanic, good shape volcanics and the good blue duels will run you $700 plus.
Exactly, $700.
Yeah.
And before it was, plateaus used to cost $50. Back in my day, old man Rant.
Back in your day, you get a good old UC for $20. Come on.
Yeah. Nothing changed about me. The perception of the card changed. So now, if I'm playing my, Aurelia, the war leader deck, and I have a plateau in it.
Yeah.
Everyone suddenly looks at
card.
You. Yeah. They suddenly look at you. They're like, are you trying to pub stomp us right now with this dual land? Be like, look, it just saved me 2 life from a Sacred Foundry. And I've just had the card for 20 years. And you don't get that kind of stuff over at cEDH. You don't get those types of looks and types of thoughts and types of discussions over in cEDH just because the passage of time, whereas something like a dual land or a Gaia's Cradle or a Mana Crypt will suddenly change everyone's perception about your deck just because it got expensive. And that's really refreshing, in my opinion, that you don't have to worry about whether or not those types of things are going to cause people to look at you funny or suddenly start targeting you or something at the casual table.
Yep, I totally agree with all of that, Ryan. And so, like, if you have been kind of frustrating with some of the taboos around EDH, or maybe just want to, give mass land destruction in your mono white hard stacks deck with a Mana Crypt and well, you can't put dual lands in a mono white deck, but with all of your expensive cards all in one thing, if you want to give that a try, maybe check out cEDH. And of course, the final thing on our list, kind of looping back to the top. We're really just looping back here to let Ryan tell his cEDH origin story, I think. But there's a lot of stigmas around the play of cEDH, way less now than there used to be now. There's like borderline zero stigmas around cEDH anymore, but there's still some of these things that people have kind of held up about, pub stompers and whatnot, or it's boring, or people are just really cutthroat and all this kind of stuff. Those are still some misconceptions that I think exist about that. And I think the best way to hit those stigmas or what have you, or misconceptions head on, is just by giving it a shot, seeing if it matches up with those perceptions that you have or that people have told you about the format. Just give it a try. And I know that actually trying out cEDH was what turned Ryan from like the super giga anti cEDH guy into, well, the person who I personally consider to be most instrumental in the spread of cEDH as something that's taken seriously. So Ryan, how did you shed yourself of misconceptions of cEDH?
This last category is kind of that catch-all. This is the category that says, if there wasn't anything that we mentioned here and you're still on the fence because of some X factor that we didn't mention here, this is the kind of that last category. Is there a stigma that is preventing you from trying cEDH out? Is it perception of your friends? Is it perception of cost? Is it perception of a play group? Is it anything like that? Anything that we didn't cover here? Give cEDH a try to shed that stigma, because that's exactly what most of them are. They're just a stigma that actually isn't true when you try it. My story is exactly that. I won't go into all the nuance and details of it because podcasts are only so long. But basically, the long short of it was exactly like you said, Cal. I had every one of those stigmas in my mind, and I had never tried it. And I thought cEDH was bad and for bad people, and it was just a horrible stain on that side of the fence. Then I didn't want to be a part of it. Long story short, certain things in my play group happened to where we all started to basically explore the idea of cEDH. I held out the longest. I dug my heels in. I was the stubborn one. And finally, I tried to be spiteful and try and teach people a lesson by bringing a deck that wins turn 1 and 2 consistently. And I was going to show everyone how not fun that is. And I was 100% wrong. I was so unbelievably wrong. I could not be more happy to have been more wrong in my life. This is the best way to play this game, in my experience, in my opinion. I had never had so much fun. All of the things that we had talked about were things that I was experiencing. Power level imbalances, somebody bringing the wrong thing, taboos, price level things, rough, not good understandings of things like rules and stuff like that. All those stigmas washed away that night. I couldn't believe how much fun we were having. And it's why I started the channel. It's why I started playing with Power MTG, is because I was like, I can't be the only one who has the wrong idea about this format. And that's our mission, is to show the world that this format can be another great way to enjoy this game we all love so much. That's our actual mission statement. And that was because I was wrong. I had a stigma around it. And there are people out there who might also have that stigma. If you have a stigma, maybe it was one we covered here, maybe it wasn't. try it. You might like it. I know I did, and I thought I was going to hate it. I had convinced myself that it was going to be awful, and I was trying to be spiteful. I was trying to be like it was awful.
I'll show you that this will
yeah.
suck.
I'll show you how bad this is. That's how it was. That's how much I hated it without knowing it. And then I tried it, and I was so wrong, and we never looked back. We absolutely love this format. And so if you have a stigma out there, I implore you, this might be your story too. This might be something that you end up telling one day. This might be like, well, I only play casual and I really, really love casual. And, I just don't cEDH because of X reason. And I tried cEDH and oh my gosh, it's my favorite format now. I hear those stories all the time. You're the reason I got into cEDH and it's the only format I play now. I love it so much. And that's what we implore to you all out there. Give it a shot. We're not saying you have to play it. We're not saying it's the only way you have to play. We're saying try it. Wholeheartedly go in and try it. I went in with negative stigma and still loved it. So maybe you can go give it a shot and see if it's for you. And if not, that's okay too.
Well, that is all we have for this episode of the Playing with Power podcast. Have you tried cEDH before? Why or why not? If you have tried it, would you try it again? What's stopping you? If you didn't like it, like we said, all the way up top, that is perfectly okay. I know plenty of people who have tried it and didn't like it, but we're happy that they did. Make sure you give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You would be surprised how much it helps other people find this podcast. You can also find Ryan and I and the rest of the Playing with Power team on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the episode notes. That wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format in our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.